Welcome back to Old School Math. Today we're going to take a look at sum or difference of perfect cubes. Now, if you watch the video on perfect squares, you'll see that perfect cubes works a lot in the same way. What we need to do before we start sum or difference of perfect cubes is to first make sure that our terms are actually perfect cubes. On this note-taking guide, you'll see that I've listed perfect cubes up through 10 cubed. This will give you a good idea that the numbers we're using are actually perfect cubes. If they're not, you might want to check for a greatest common factor. So these are really easy to identify. They'll always be binomials with both terms being perfect cubes. A binomial is just a polynomial with only two terms, two things separated by a plus or minus. They'll be in the form of a cubed plus b cubed. They can be factored with next to no work, but to do this you need to know soap. You're going to clean these up like you clean your hands with soap. And soap just tells you about your signs. So the S in soap stands for same, O stands for opposite, and the AP stands for always positive. Let's take a look at how this works with our sums of perfect cubes. So if we have something that looks like a cubed plus b cubed, the soap is going to look like a plus b, that plus being the same sign as was here. The O is for opposite, so we see that this negative is opposite the sign of what we had in between a cubed and b cubed. And this last one is going to be AP, always positive. If we look at the difference of perfect cubes, a cubed minus b cubed, we see that negative is the same, it's opposite, and that last one is always positive. So the SOAP, same, opposite, always positive. Let's look at a couple examples together now. For our first example here, we get x cubed plus 125. So if we wrote this like we have up here, a cubed plus b cubed, we would see that we would write this as x cubed plus 125 is 5 cubed. So from here, what we'll want to do is just rewrite this in this formula. So this would be a plus b in our first parentheses. So it would be x plus 5. Whatever is in this parenthesis is a, and whatever is in this parenthesis is b. In our next parenthesis, we do a squared. So that would be x squared minus ab. So minus a times b. So that would be x times 5, or 5x. And then we're going to add to that b squared. So b is 5, b squared would be 25. And it's factored. For example 2, we notice that we have 2a cubed plus 250. Well, one thing that both these have in common is the 2. So we could factor out a 2. We could leave that as a cubed plus 125. Well, a cubed plus 125, we just factored that up here. So let's look at what this would look like with the greatest common factor. We would have a 2 out front, and then everything else would stay the same. X plus 5. And then x squared minus 5x plus 25 is how that's going to factor, because that's how we factored this above. In number 3, we see that we've got a 125u cubed minus 1. So this might not necessarily look like difference of perfect cubes, but keep in mind that 1 is a perfect cube. So we could write this as 5u cubed, and now 5u is our a value, minus 1 cubed. So when we factor this, it's going to look something like, keep in mind if we got a difference of perfect cubes, it's going to be a minus b. So that would be 5u minus 1. And then in parentheses, we've got a squared. So if we square 5u, we have to square both pieces of it, right? Square the 5 and you get 25. Square the u, you get u squared. We're going to add, so the O stands for opposite, so the sign changes to an opposite. We're going to add a times b. So 5u times 1 is just 5u. And then the last sign is always positive, and it's just b squared. So 1 squared is just 1. And it's factored. In number 4, let's take a look at how this works. 375x cubed minus 3. Now we see this looks like a difference of perfect cubes, but 375 is not a perfect cube, and 3 is not a perfect cube. So let's take a look at 375. We know that that is just 3 times 125, We've got a 3 there, so 3 would be our greatest common factor. 125x cubed minus 3, or sorry, minus 1, because we factored the 3 out, okay? So that means our a value here would just be 5x, and our b value is just 1. Now, I know we're using 5s and 1s a lot in these 3 examples, but I think it shows you a good idea of how these can work differently for different types of situations. So when we do this factoring, it's going to look exactly like we had above, except for instead of u's, we have x's here. And we've got that 3 out front. So that would be 3 times, we've got a minus b, so that'd be 5x minus 1. And I know to use a negative here because in the SOAP, the S stands for same. So the first sign in our factored form should be the same. The next term is a squared, so that's 5x times 5x, that's 25x squared. And the next sign is O, that's opposite. And then we've got a times b, so that's 5x times 1, which is 5x. And the last sign is always positive, and it's b squared, which is 1 squared, which is just 1. And this is factored. Thank you for watching this video on sum or difference of perfect cubes. Hopefully it was helpful to you. If you have questions, leave them in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe.